Now, one of the most common misconceptions that people often have regarding physical media and console games is this idea that we live in an era where we no longer own the physical games that we purchase. Now, I've made the argument several times that when it comes to PlayStation games and Nintendo first-party games, the vast majority of physical copies out there, you do actually own them, because you can play them regardless of any download or online requirement. It's not all games, but it does apply to most of them, and there's an entire database that proves that. Now, a weird argument that I've often seen people make is this idea that the PlayStation 3/Xbox 360 era of games was the last one where we actually own games, and it seems to stem from this logic that back then you could play games directly from the disc, but with modern consoles there's this supposed requirement to download the game in order to play them, therefore taking your ownership away from you. Now, this is a very flawed argument for one simple reason. What people describe as download is most of the times a combination of game installation and an up-to-date patch that's queued for a download. None of that actually means that you need to download the game in order to play them. In the past, I've shown video footage of me installing Like a Dragon Ancient on a console that was completely disconnected from the internet. It was literally impossible for it to download anything. This is not an argument. This is not a case of a nuanced discussion. This is not a, hey, let's hear the other side of the argument. No, it is literally impossible to download something from a console that's completely disconnected from the internet. That just makes no sense. The game does have patches, and you might as well install them because they will iron out some minor technical issues and bring some quality of life improvements, but they're not a requirement to play the title, and this is for most games. In this case, all I did was just simply copy the game files from the disc to the console, and I was perfectly able to play the version 1.0 build of the game without needing to install any day one patch. Now again, I want to make this clear, this does not apply to all games, but this does apply to the vast majority of them. So the only issue I can see you having with this newer era of physical media distribution relative to the past is just simply the notion that you have to copy the game file to the console. But I've personally never really seen that as an issue. For me, as long as the game is playable offline and will work regardless of how many times I reinstall it, I don't really care if I'm playing it off of the disc or not. If anything, running games off of the physical media is very inefficient. While I respect Nintendo for striving to improve the speed of their cartridges and optimizing their games to run on those game cards, I personally find this to be a less efficient way of running games, because not only are you increasing the cost of manufacturing and printing the physical media, but in the end, it's probably still not going to run as well as running the game internally on the console, which can take better advantage of the faster speed. The PS5, as an example, has an NVMe SSD. There is no Blu-ray disc out there that reaches anywhere near that speed, and I doubt Sony will ever even bother to manufacture optical media that rivals that levels of speed anytime soon, as though Blu-ray technology will always primarily target home video media. So as long as the speed of those discs is enough to handle the resolutions, codecs, and bitrates that they're targeting, then that's about as fast as we're ever going to see Blu-rays evolve to. In fact, they're more likely to just outright abandon physical media before they'll get to the point where they upgrade their Blu-rays to match SSD's levels of speed, because that would require a large production cost and increased prices, and all for the sake of selling something that most consumers are probably not even going to buy. Not to mention, playing games off of the disc can cause potential latency penalties and I/O bottlenecks that comes from processing data that's coming from an external device. And if you ask me, one of the biggest quality of life improvements that the PS5 offered was the fast NVMe SSD. So if that became compromised, I feel like it would be a downgrade over just sticking to what we do right now, which is copying the data to the internal drive. But I think that's all I wanted to say. I've sort of been seeing this discussion getting revived after people kept bringing up the Switch 2 game key cards, and a lot of people were spreading misinformation that this has been the standard for gaming for a while, which is false. In my experience of buying PS4 and PS5 games, I've never bought a copy of a game that only came with a key. There are of course some games that don't include the full game data on the disc. There are some online only games that constantly need a connection to the internet. These are problems that are plaguing the modern era of gaming. In no way am I trying to pretend like these aren't issues. They are. In fact, I've brought attention to them several times on my channel. But the sooner you start exploring other games besides these sloppy AAA games from the likes of Ubisoft, the sooner you'll realize that most developers actually do respect their consumers enough to release a decent physical copy. But yeah, I think that's all I have to share. Goodbye.